Welcome to the inaugural Pod Table Talks, an exciting new initiative by the Pod Networks Conference Committee. I'm your fabulous host, Pamela Roy, a longtime member of the Pod Network and former co-chair of the Diversity Committee. Today, we'll be discussing the annual conference's review process and evaluation rubric so that we can make things more transparent and hopefully bring us together as a community. Joining me this afternoon are three guests. First up is Peter Felton, the Executive Director of the Center for Engaged Learning, Assistant Provost for Teaching and Learning, and the Professor of History at Elon University. Peter, say hello.
Hello.
Awesome. Let's also welcome Carol Sabino Sullivan, Assistant Director of Faculty Teaching and Learning Initiatives for the Center for Teaching and Learning at Georgia Tech. Carol, join me in saying hello to your fellow pod colleagues.
Hello, thanks for having me for this conversation.
Absolutely. Our other guest today is Michael Palmer, Director for the Center for Teaching Excellence and faculty member at the University of Virginia. Michael, warm hello to you and say hello.
Hello, pod friends.
Awesome. And the other two in this Zoom room, the dynamic duo, Jared Quinn and Tammy McCoy, are Fearless Conference co-chairs. What's up, Tammy and Jared?
We are excited.
Awesome.
Absolutely.
So Pod's been around for a really long time, huh? 47 years. That's a lot of conferencing. So this year's conference theme is reimagine, reconnect, restart. Jared and Tammy, what do you want to say to fellow podsters that are writing away?
Yeah, well, we as a conference team, we don't want to move backwards to how things were, before the pandemic, even though that's tempting because there's a lot of nostalgia and selective memory about the good old times that probably never actually happened. We want to move forward, and forward is full of mystery, of risk, of failure, and adventure. Forward is the space where we put what we've learned to work when we reimagine, reconnect, and restart our vision for our communities. Our awesome conference team is creating a space to start something new and incredible. So whether you join us online or in Seattle, we can't wait to welcome you.
That's right, Jared. So on point. We can't wait to experience another conference season with you. We're going to have one pod with two distinct paths grounded in a shared community. That means you get to choose how you want to participate in this year's conference. As you submit your proposal, you'll need to decide if you want to be part of the online experience or in-person experience in Seattle. And as you think about your proposal, keep in mind that we want you to share your moments, those places in your centers, departments, institutions, and in yourselves where you decide to reimagine, reconnect, and restart your plans, priorities, and practices.
Jared and Tammy, that's such a warm invitation. Thank you so much. And it's just very creative and exciting that we're reimagining conferences in terms of participation. We need to be able to walk the talk and embody inclusion and access. So thank you for really spearheading this team and really going for it. I also hear you have your hands full these days with their conference business. So I guess we're gonna have to say goodbye for now, but thanks for being here for this brief stint.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, thanks. Bye-bye.
So, Peter, you've been a pod member for 21 years, right?
Yep.
Wow, and a reviewer for just as long. So, based on that experience, I'm going to dive into some questions here, okay? What are effective ways that you've seen colleagues connect the content of their session with the conference theme? I mean, there's a total of 4 points that goes towards alignment with conference theme in terms of the rubric. So it's not just a super catchy title, right?
No, and Pam, the most common thing by far is people just pull words from the the title of the conference theme. So I'm expecting 1 million proposals for pod that are reimagining this and restarting that and reconnecting the other thing. And that's fine. But listen to what Tammy and Jared are saying and what the call says about transitions and risks and emotions and things like this, because you can connect more deeply with the theme. I mean, a silly example, but just to be concrete, I've seen lots of proposals that are titled things like reimagining the new faculty orientation. And that's fine, but you might be one of 8 proposals at pod that are reimagining. So I don't know anything about your session, except it's about new faculty orientation. If you call it something like, community and equity in the new faculty orientation, that gets to the same point, except it helps both reviewers and then your audience in pod to know what you're actually doing rather than just reimagining, because everything's going to be reimagined.
Right. I love that. I love that take on it. Carol, Michael, what about you?
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing, that it's so, I found that the sessions that I have seen that do the best job of connecting to the theme are ones where it's more deeply embedded than, it's not just like a window dressing. In other words, there's some kind of framework really that helps us think about the theme. And then, maybe the title doesn't even say the theme at all, but it's helping us to think in this direction. So I would actually start with, what kind of questions does the theme raise for you? And then spend some creative time there and see what happens. Actually, I think those maybe are my favorite ones. And of course, they all sort of end up bringing up initiatives that we do on our campus, but they kind of start from a place of possibility and creativity and see where the theme lets us go.
Awesome.
Those are all great examples. I was part of the conference team when part of the theme was about weaving. And boy, I could not stand that word after that conference. It's like, how many ways can you distort weaving and put it in a title? I was thinking a little more concretely about the proposal itself. And, it seems simple, but I'm surprised at how many authors don't do it. And that is, have a paragraph that says, these are the ways in which this idea, this program, whatever it is, actually connects to the theme. And so as a reviewer, when I'm actually going through my rubric, I'm saying, did they do this? Oh yeah, they gave me a whole paragraph that told me how they were going to do it. So think concretely about, how do you signal to that reviewer that you have thought about this in deep ways?
Yeah, I love that because what the three of you are really saying is, have the creativity, maybe don't include it directly in the title, but really think through what questions are raised for you, and then also be explicit. Maybe a specific paragraph that addresses in what ways your content relates to the theme. So I like that. Thanks so much. Thoughtful responses there. So we're a couple of minutes in, and I love being real. So here's some real and brave questions for all of us for a minute. So when we submit a proposal, it's pretty intensely vulnerable. At least it is for me. And I can tell you the range of thoughts that go through my head. Does what I'm writing make sense to the audience? What will reviewers think? Will they relate? This took me so much time. Maybe I coordinated with all these other peers. What if what we present isn't innovative? And the worst would be, I don't want to wait till August to get my feedback back. I feel so anxious about it. Carol, you've submitted a bunch of proposals over like the 10 plus years that you've been involved with pod, and reviewing for equally as long. I'm sure you'll relate somehow to the sensitivity of what it might feel like as an author to experience this as you put yourself out there. So my question to you is, in what ways do you think that relating to the author's experience really plays a role in how you rate the proposal and feedback? I mean, assuming that it does. I mean, we all want to connect to our colleagues.
Absolutely. Yeah. Like you said, it's, putting themselves out there and keeping the humanity at the center. And, last year we got a chance to collaborate with you in putting together that reviewer training. And that was one of my favorite perspectives that emerged out of that, is to think about this not as a number that's you're scoring so that we can make some decisions at a conference, but as a conversation with a colleague in the way that we all care deeply. Like if we were to think about the way that we give feedback to a colleague that we were working with in an educational development setting, we had observed their class, what we would be very careful in the way that we generated our report, the way that we sat down with them. And, to imagine that when we make the reviewer that we're actually sitting across from that person and sharing some feedback, honest feedback, truthful feedback, yet we never lose sight of the person that we're having the conversation with.
Yeah, that's very true. I like that. And, Michael and Peter, do you want to add to that or other affective domains that you think about when you're doing a review?
Yeah, I'll jump in, and I guess I'll out myself a little bit. I think over the years, I've had more conference proposals rejected than accepted. I won't put Peter on the stage, but I'm sure he was on a couple of those at least with me. So, it happens, and a lot of the things are out of your control. And it's easier to take when the feedback you get from a reviewer is actually constructive and helps you think about what you're doing in new and different ways. And so when I'm thinking about my own reviews, I'm always leading with curiosity as opposed to critique. It's really what, as a reader, what excites me? What do I want to know more about? What questions do I have? And I think, when I take that mindset, it produces a review that I hope is useful to the author, regardless of what the conference committee's decision is, right? That they can take that and they can learn from it and they can do better work because of that. So that's that curiosity I think is really important. That helps you do that connection. If I'm sitting in front of a colleague, like Carol said, I would be curious about what they're telling me. So why can't I do that through this written document as well?
Right. And Michael, maybe also there's other places to pitch once you receive the feedback. It's not just pod one-off conferences. There's so many other conferences in the teaching and learning space. There's publishing. There's so many different ways to take that work that you've done and so not get negative, or just stay optimistic about what can happen next with it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm one of the editors of To Improve the Academy, and right. People, turn their pod work around and submit it there, and it's amazing, and gets out in the world a different way. So it's not that the door is closed. It's let's think about a different door.
Great. Peter.
Yeah, just a couple things to add to what my brilliant colleagues have said. One is sort of like Michael was saying, I try to affirm whatever it is the person's intending to do with their proposal, and recognize the strengths in it, even if the proposal isn't a good fit for pod for whatever reason. And I really see myself having received a lot of feedback, a lot of pod proposals over the years, my fair share or more of rejections. I try to see myself as a reviewer, as a critical friend, and thinking about, so what do I need? What do I want? Because we've talked about rejections. One of the things I find almost as frustrating as a rejection is just a flat acceptance with no guidance, no feedback, no anything else. It's nice to think people rated this a 4 point whatever, but I'm a historian. I want some words with this. And so, tell me what you see as the strengths or what you see as really promising and exciting and makes you curious about wanting to come to this session, or give me a suggestion of how to make the session even more valuable. That's so useful to me, even when it's a negative review, but with positive review the same way. So that's what I'm looking for in a really good review.
Yeah, that's awesome. I appreciate that and the honesty that you all shared your thoughts there, because we're a community after all. It's pod isn't one of those stuffy conferences, at least in my experience for the last decade, and we really are trying to build each other up as a community. And so thanks for providing that back end of what it feels like to be a reviewer and provide your insights. And we can only work with what the proposers give us. So don't make assumptions, like really put it out there, be explicit, make sure you convey your ideas. I know some parts of the proposal have word count limits, but some parts don't. So it's really an opportunity to express yourself. So I want to move on to a new feature of the call for proposals this year. So typically we ask proposers to talk about what audience they believe their work engages. And, they just have to check a box like, sure, we think this is relatable to small colleges. This year, we're actually changing it up a little bit and asking proposers to think about how their work actually impacts or influences a particular audience. So how applicable or transferable is the session's content to center directors, graduate students, multi-campus institutions, small colleges? There'll basically be a list of professional contexts and institutional contexts, and you only really need to pick two. So I think that's doable. I'm hoping that's not too far of a stretch for people and really gets them to think about the implications of their work. So Michael, you've been with Pod for a whopping 16 years and a reviewer just as long. So my question to you is, what have you seen in your years of being a reviewer and suggestions you might have for how colleagues can effectively illustrate that their idea, topic, or practice is relevant to the field of educational or organizational development, or how transferable it is to these various kinds of contexts?
Yeah, thanks. I like this addition because you go to a conference, you go to a session, you're like, that's great, but that will never work in my institution or in my particular context. I don't have the staffing, I don't have all of these things. So I think it's really great. I'm going to kind of think big picture here for a second. I think a lot of the stuff that's proposed at a conference, people are excited about it. It's new to them in some ways. Maybe it's a new program, maybe it's a new idea. I think a lot of times that we're so insulated within our own institutions that we don't realize that there's a bigger context. And there's people that have been in this field a long time and they've seen a lot of things. To actually do a little bit of legwork to see, is this new and novel? In what ways is your work kind of adding to this? And that can help you think about what are the right contexts in which this fits in. You also make sure you do a little extra legwork of, do some Google searches, post to the listserv, check the literature, update your references. Those are some very basic things. But then, like I said earlier on the calling out how it connects to the conference theme, help your reader understand how this work is unique and it's adding to an ongoing conversation around educational development. Everything happens in a progression, right? Nothing is ever completely brand new, but how is your work, uniquely different? And then, think about the limitations of that. Maybe have a short section that says, we recognize that this won't work in these particular, or only works in these particular kinds of situations.
Yeah, that's helpful. And it kind of segues really well into the questions I had for Carol and Peter, just slightly different. But Michael talked about the creativity, making the direct connection to educational development. I'm also interested in how do you explain a creative practice well? That's the rubric specifically, we're making it public this year in the call for proposal. And we've always had some type of rubric people can access, but we're showing very clearly the different categories. So how do you just not get it all jumbled together? Like, it's fresh, it's creative and innovative. Well, there's nuances there, right? Those words mean different things. So Peter and Carol, see if you can tackle that.
Give us an easy question there, Pam. Yeah, how can you explain your creativity well? I think here I'm going to vulnerability here, thinking about building on what Michael said is how does this apply to specific contexts, and being honest about where you're coming from. And most of us are, well, for the last 2 years, we've been operating on in continuously changing situations, and even the things that we used to do before just stopped working in the same way. And so that vulnerability around, here's how my landscape is changing, and here's how I thought about, what needs to shift about the things that used to work. All right. This, I'm not seeing people in person as much, or, there's barriers that didn't happen before about the ways that faculty are able to engage with their students, or, we could all make a whole long list of all the things that have been continually shifting. And then, just engaging in that in a real way as we share this new approach. So I think where I'm coming to is that to see the creativity, it's not, let me present this as a total complete package, but let's see some of the experiences that have gone into shaping the way it is. And that might also help it, help the relevance to other people's context become more evident, right? Because it's not just shown as, here it is, shiny, beautiful thing that I've created, but here's how it's shaped. And that's a way in to think about, how are your specific contexts, how might you be able to take this thing and transform it as well so that it works for you?
Great. Yeah.
I think, Carol, you're onto exactly the right issue around context, because almost none of us ever reinvent a wheel or invent a wheel. We're reinventing things all the time. But what's different is I'm doing this here and you're doing that at Georgia Tech, right? Or this person's doing this with adjunct faculty at a community college, or this person's doing this, in a pandemic setting. So there's lots of different ways where we can frame our work as being innovative or new, partly because of the context we're doing it in. But often pod proposals just wash away the context. Now, we're not supposed to reveal where we are and things like this, right? But there's a lot you can say about who you're working with and what the context is that really helps someone see that, yeah, I'm familiar with that topic, but I'm not familiar with it in that context, or I'm not familiar with those sort of permutations. The other thing I'd want to say on this, and it connects up to Michael's point too, is when we think about what's innovative and when we think about, what the implications are, we don't always have to give audience members the answer to this, right? A lot of our work is a set of trade-offs. As Michael said, I don't have the budget, I don't have the staff to do this. Okay, so how do I do this without much staff, without much budget, right? That's actually the innovative thing here. Or this is a tension that we often run into in this work. And so what I want to do is try to frame the tension in the session and then get participants to think about what are the implications of looking at this tension from different perspectives. So we can bring, as Carol said earlier, really good questions to our sessions rather than always, here's the solution. And that can be really innovative and really helpful.
Yeah, Peter, you bring up a really important point that I hadn't even really thought of, but the light bulb just went off. So pod proposals are all anonymous. I mean, in terms of the institutional context. So this question really now will allow people to show how it's relatable by going into the different contexts that they can connect to. So again, just making the point that here's an opportunity, a shining opportunity to really be explicit and let I think this will help when people are choosing online or in person. They can then see, okay, well, wow, this really relates to this particular population, and that's my population. So maybe this is a session I really want to check out. So thank you for that point. Hadn't thought about that one. So I want to do a little bit of fun, take a little break off of the heavy questions, and ask each of you to lightning speed tell me your favorite session to attend at Pod. You've been going, each of you, for over a decade, and why you like that particular session. Why don't we start off with you, Peter?
Favorite session type, I think, is interactive workshops, interactive sessions, because I like the combination of sort of new content or new questions or new something, and then interacting with new people. That combination for me is like golden.
Awesome. Yep. Michael?
Oh, I love a meaty pre-conference where I can just sit there and spend a half a day, a full day, thinking conceptually with lots of smart people and walk away with something tangible. That's in the ideal sense that I can actually put into practice. I do want to say though, as a presenter, I love a poster session. Man, it's like everybody thinks nobody wants to do that, right? But as a presenter, if I have something that I'm just testing the waters on, the types of conversations I have at a poster session are far better than any interactive session I could go to.
Absolutely, I concur with that. Yeah, thanks, Michael. Carol.
That was where I go in. Oh man, I just love the poster sessions. Just how many ideas can you get in a span, that short amount of time? So both from the attendee and the presenter side. And, I also want to say that a new type of session that was innovated during our time online, the workshop in the box, has actually been such a useful session model. I've taken some great ideas, and it's been like a super helpful model that I've have graduate students that I work with are like creating workshops in the boxes. It's been a really inspiring type of format.
Awesome. Yeah. No, well, I don't know if I'll be in Seattle specifically or if I'll be online, but just hearing you speak about these sessions gets me excited to for November coming around the corner. So I want to jump into another question for you all. I think one aspect that is really challenging for reviewers to decipher is how to really illustrate that your session advances or advocates for equity and inclusion. So I guess my question to the three of you is, what are some inclusive strategies that really stood out for you as you read proposals that you can offer colleagues in terms of how to incorporate this notion of equity and inclusion into the session? Carol, why don't we start off with you?
I think one of the structural advantages of pod sessions is that they are set up to foster collaboration and discussion among colleagues. And one of the things I see in proposals that don't always convey this dimension of how they're being designed to be inclusive is that there's not enough detail about how those conversations will take place during a session. So, budgeting enough room in the proposal to share, the way that you're thoughtfully thinking about how you're going to bring all of the different voices in the room into the conversation, so that all the different perspectives do have a chance to be considered, to be heard, to be brought into the insights and the front of what we hope participants are going to take away from the session.
Thank you. Peter or Michael?
Yeah, thank you, Carol. I'm thinking a lot of proposals I've read over the years, they have this outline of activities, and I think there's no way you can possibly do this in any meaningful way. I'd rather you give more time at the start for some community building, for some relationship building, and cut out some of this other stuff. So being really thoughtful about how you're engaging participants, and the varied opportunities. So it doesn't always have to be, it's a small group discussion or a think, pair, share. There could be, a variety of modalities and techniques to engage with participants, but also thinking about, the kinds of materials that you have available during the session and how accessible those materials are going to be, what kind of formats they're in. If you're going to use videos, make sure they're captioned. If you're going to use PDFs, make sure they're readable. So there's a lot of things, and you can signal that in very easy ways in a proposal. It can be just a couple sentences to say, we recognize that this is important and we're committed to creating accessible materials. And of course, thinking about your actual projects or the things you're proposing, to again really think about your own positionalities, the identities, the context that Peter and Carol were talking about. Those are really important to lay out for the reviewers so they have a better understanding of how your work is actually, in what ways is it accessible to a broader audience.
It's great. Yeah, Michael.
Yeah, I want to add just one thing to what Carol and Michael said, and it was sort of implied in both. But one of the struggles I've seen with proposals sometimes around this issue is the one part of the proposal will really explicitly address equity and diversity and things like this. And then the rest of the proposal doesn't. So it says, this is central to what we're going to do. And then you look at what they describe is going to happen during the session, and it's chock full of other stuff. You're like, huh. So really thinking, how do you pull this thread all the way through? How do you make this really central to what you're doing and convey that so that a reader who doesn't know you, doesn't know who you are, doesn't have that in their pocket to say, well, I know Pam will do this. As a reviewer, you can't do that. You only get what you see. So do you see it? And do you see it threaded throughout?
Yeah, we've put a word count this year on the this portion of the proposal, because we do sometimes just see, we plan to use universal design. Great. But what does that mean for you? And like Peter is saying, how is equity and inclusion really embedded into what you're presenting? And so we don't have those types of responses, because it really, having trained now over 200 reviewers last year, and then this year we'll have same that we're training. This is some of the feedback that we're getting is how do we know this actually gets a 4 on its rating, and how do we talk about this? And this is why I'm bringing this up in this table talk, because it's such a dicey category for reviewers to get into. So you're forewarned, make sure you're writing your proposals in a way that really explicitly address this. So thanks for that, the three of you. So there's something that's been on my mind throughout this table talk. I'm thinking about summertime. The spring is the spring blooms are coming up, but I'm already thinking ahead to the conference team cycle, and they're going to be sending out their acceptance letters and so forth in the summertime. And maybe you don't get one. Well, you get something, but you don't get what you wanted. And you're like, geez, my proposal just got slammed. I love this community so much, and I was excited for Pod, but I'm not presenting. And it just got rejected, even though, there's so many layers to that word. But it's an unfortunate scenario, but it may not be an unfortunate scenario, because there's so many ways to think about this. So you all are seasoned presenters. I'd love to hear what you'd like to say to your colleagues if the proposal doesn't get accepted, or maybe what you see as the tension when you're deciding between a check the box that says accept, or accept with reservations, or reject. What delineates that for you? And so, yeah, maybe Peter, do you want to jump in first on that?
Sure. And Pam, great question. And, as we've said before, rejection hurts. Rejection is frustrating. What I try to do when I get a proposal rejected after I go for a walk and do that is say, well, you know what, this is actually a sign of the health of Pod's organization, probably, and Pod as a community, because I think I put in a pretty good proposal. And if this proposal isn't high enough quality to get in, then what's in the conference is going to be amazing. And I'm going to learn a lot, and so instead of, and you could do that really superficially, but instead of thinking about it's all about me, say this is about our community. And there's a lot I can learn from our community. And so I didn't hit it right this time. I didn't frame what I was doing in a way that persuaded my colleagues that this contribution is important, but there's still a lot in this community that can help me and that I can contribute to in other ways, even by attending the conference and engaging in meaningful ways. So that's where I try to go. It doesn't always work, but that's my intention.
That's really humble, Peter. Thank you for that. Michael.
Yeah, Peter, I need to learn some lessons from you. It's hard.
Just old, Michael. I've done. You get enough rejections, you got to frame them a different way.
In some ways, it's like student evaluations, right? You get a lot of good feedback, but all you can think about is that one negative one, and you just obsess over it. And unfortunately, in a review process, you have maybe three reviewers, and so it can be it can feel worse than it is. One of the things is, well, I'd love it to not take it personally, that it's somewhat of an evolution of the field. I also, I take a kind of a growth mindset into everything I do, and think about, if it was comfortable, if I knew the outcome, then I'm doing the wrong thing. There needs to be some risk in it. And if you're taking some risks, there's a chance that it's going to come back and people are going to say, not yet, right? And not yet is okay, because that means I can do some more work, or I can cut bait and go, right? I don't have to continue on that line. I can come up with the next new idea. So I think it's feedback. We take that feedback, we grow from it. And then we go to the conference and have a great time and shop that idea around. Just because you don't give a presentation at a conference doesn't mean you don't have an opportunity to give a presentation at a conference. And the most meaningful presentations you're going to give are one-on-one and in small groups. So, take that work and shop it around.
Well, great, Michael. Thank you. Very true. Carol.
Yeah, great perspectives, both Peter and Michael. There's no way around feeling that sting of rejection, when I've, been really excited about a proposal and then have to let go of that conference. I actually wanted to add something from having been on the conference team, that the sometimes it really isn't so much that a proposal that was rejected had some kind of serious flaw in it. I mean, sometimes it literally comes down to, we have space for this number. And that when you actually look at the difference in scores between the ones that were accepted and the ones that were not, it's often not even all that much of a difference. It's just, what can we possibly squeeze in, and we get as much as possible. So that's that. I don't know how helpful it would be to anybody who might be in this situation this year, but not to be too discouraged. There's just so many amazing ideas in our community, and I love what Michael just said about shop it around. That's the other thing I love about Pod is the collaborations that often get started at the conference when you share an idea like that. And then maybe next year you go in with a proposal and you have, people from multiple different institutions, and you're working on a similar idea, and it becomes something that's stronger and bigger than what it started out with this year. So so just want to offer that encouragement, not to give up on the idea necessarily, and not to give up on the conference if you are unfortunately in a situation where your proposal doesn't get accepted this year.
That's brilliant. I feel encouraged already and ready for whatever happens. So thank you. I appreciate that. And we're winding down here. So is there anything else that the three of you might want to share and shout out to your colleagues that are in writing land right now?
Just first, thanks for contributing to our profession. And secondly, be kind to the conference team. They do so much work, and it's all volunteer, and it's really important in bringing us together. So remember, even if you get frustrated, the conference team still get to be the heroes in the story.
Yeah, I'll just throw in that, I've been going to the Pod conference for a long time, and I just always walk away so energized and feeling loved and appreciated, and that I've learned, right? And we get so busy in our day-to-day lives that we don't always get to do that. And so the program is going to be great whether I'm in it or not, right? And so, and in fact, when I'm not presenting, I can actually enjoy it more because I'm not getting ready for that high pressure talk. So, just embrace it for whatever it ends up being for you.
I wholeheartedly agree with both of those perspectives. And I wanted to add that because it is such a small group of volunteers who are putting this together, we sometimes miss things. And so if you've seen something from your perspective, please write and let us know what has happened. You know, a lot of the work that we're like, this conversation is happening. A lot of the changes that happened to the conference are motivated because we heard from members out there who've experienced something, who have a question, who have a concern. My experience at POD has been that this is an organization that really cares to know that and will invest a lot of energy and resources into making changes that are supportive.
Yeah, absolutely. Thumbs up on all of that. So it's been an amazing inaugural Pod Table Talks. I hope we continue this tradition. I gained a lot from it. So thank you for bringing your full selves to today's discussion. Totally grateful to all of you. So bye, everybody.
Bye all. Thanks, Pam.